I can make your parents hurt themselves. I can make them hurt each other. I can make them eat each other if I want to. Do I want to, Alex? This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you. I'm Matt.
And I'm Mel. And this is the No Fear Cast, podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. Join us as we near the end of our latest series, where we've been getting up close and personal with the psycho Biddy herself. We're talking Hagsploitation.
All right. So we are here for our final episode of this series about Hagsploitation with probably one of the most recent examples and what I think was kind of our original inspiration for this series, which, first of all, just as a side note, I want to say I've really enjoyed doing this series. It was not something that had been on my radar per se, and I've learned a lot and watched some good movies and had some great discussions with everyone. So, um, but we are here this time to talk about the 2025 movie Weapons. And for those of you not familiar with Weapons, it was obviously released 2025. It was written and directed by Zach Kreger, who is also known for the movie Barbarian. And if you have a longer memory, he was part of the sketch comedy group The Whitest Kids You Know, which I think there's a further discussion that we could possibly have about comedy and horror, because both Zach Kreger and Jordan Peele had started in comedy and moved into horror, and there's a lot of overlaps and similarities there. So maybe we should put a pin in this as a possible future series. But I digress. So we're talking about Weapons, which again came out in 2025, and Amy Madigan actually won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, and also the Actors Award and Critics' Choice Awards for Best Supporting Actress. Her last Academy Award nomination was actually many years ago, back in 1986. And just a little bit about the movie. It's hard to describe this movie plot wise, because it is a bit just disjointed. It's told through multiple points of view, which I think Mel and I have a lot to say about that. Also, as a side note, you may have noticed Lisa is not able to join us for this recording. She'll be back for the next episode, of course, but we just couldn't make the schedules work, unfortunately. But anyway, the movie Weapons. It's disjointed. It's told through multiple points of view, and you kind of have to assemble it yourself, if you will, as the viewer. But the back of the matchbox summary would be that one night at 2:17 a.m., every member of an elementary school class, one specific class taught by one specific teacher, except for one, all the kids except for one run out of their homes at 2:17 a.m. And they know this because some of the parents have video doorbells, like Ring doorbells, or things like that can actually show the timestamp of when this happened. And the story itself picks up about a month after that happened. And as the school has reopened, the investigation is, of course, still ongoing. And it follows multiple intersecting people's stories in the aftermath of this. And that's very vague, and I know that we will probably have plenty of spoilers. So, as usual, if you don't like spoilers, we would suggest that you go ahead, put pause, go watch the movie, and then come back to this episode. But if you don't mind spoilers, there will be some, and I assume that they will kind of come out as we discuss the plot and themes and such of the movie. As is our usual tradition, we like to kick things off by talking about kind of our experiences with the topic of the episode. And in this particular case, I remember seeing the first preview for this movie before it came out, and I said, "Ooh, that looks really good. I want to see that." And for some reason, I was not able to catch it while it was in theaters. I think it was definitely in the theaters in the town I live in, but I don't think it was there for very long. Um, or maybe it was, and I just don't go to the theater often enough. But either way, I didn't catch it in the theaters, but I did catch it when it came on streaming. It's currently on HBO Max. I think that's where I watched it originally too. But pretty much the day that it hit streaming, I said, "Oh, well, this is what I'm watching tonight." And so I watched it and I loved it. And I had a lot of thoughts and I had a lot of questions and a lot of uh, a lot of thoughts because it's a very well done movie for in my opinion. There's a lot about the movie, from the acting performances to the technical aspects of how Zach Kreger frames a lots of shots and things like that. And then that doesn't even touch on the plot, which is kind of bananas when you get to it. Um, there's This is a film that will answer some of your questions, but it's not interested in answering all of them. So you may have questions about what is going on and why things are happening that will not be answered by the end of the movie. And that's something that I've always liked. I like ambiguity. I love when things are clear cut and dry as well, but ambiguity is a lot of fun because that's when you can really like dive deep and say, oh, it could be this or this or what about this, which is something that Mel and I were starting to do in kind of the episode pre-taping before we hit record, just in talking before we started recording this episode. So that was my original experience. Watched it when it first came to streaming, really enjoyed it, and then rewatched it again just now, well, just recently for us to record this episode. I will say this, and this is something that I mentioned to Mel as well in our pre-episode conversation, that I had actually forgotten that there are some really graphic and brutally violent scenes in the movie. I've remembered some of them, but I did not remember others. And I don't know if that was repression or what, but it was definitely, it was a shock as I was watching it the second time and going, oh, that's right. That did happen and things like that. But so it's definitely not a movie for kids. It has, I mean, it's mostly just violence and very weird, spooky themes. But yeah, I mean, I loved it the first time. Thought it stood up just as well on rewatch. I can definitely see myself watching this again in the future multiple times because I think there's a lot to look at, a lot to be dissected in the plot that maybe I caught but didn't catch fully in the first viewing. So Mel, I'll turn it over to you. What were your thoughts and first impressions and all of that?
Sure. Yeah, I just watched this movie for the first time for this particular recording. So I just watched it on Prime like a couple days ago. So I will literally be giving first impressions. But I was thinking while you were talking, Matt, about seeing the trailer. Um, I remember seeing a poster for this movie when I was at the theater to see another movie. And then I think I might have seen a trailer at some point or part of one. But when I found out the original, like when I found out the premise of it, like just the part about the kids running away at a certain time, the first couple things that came into my mind were like, is this like a Pied Piper type thing where someone's luring all these kids away? And then I also thought, I wondered if it was because there's a Ray Bradbury story, and I meant to look up the title before we recorded, and I did not. So I apologize for this. But I remember reading a Ray Bradbury story where aliens are trying to invade Earth. This will be a spoiler for the story. I'm sorry, but aliens were trying to invade Earth, kind of like um, enlisted the help of children. This was actually adapted to a TV show, a brief TV show that only made it like one season pre-pandemic, a while back. And basically, the invading party, I believe it was extraterrestrials, but the invading party basically like draws the kids, like their parents aren't really paying attention to the kids when they're playing outside, and they get them kind of playing this game, and it turns out to be something kind of nefarious that the kids, we're not sure if they understand or not. Um, so those are the first couple things I was kind of thinking about. So I was intrigued, but I ended up not watching it when it was in the theaters. Listeners know that I don't watch a huge number of horror movies. I can be more squeamish about horror when it's visual versus reading. So while I was curious about weapons, I just didn't get to watching it. So I sat down and watched it. And my first impressions, like I was telling Matt before we hit record, are that I was still really interested in this premise. Like, what does it mean that these kids all run away? I mean, we like to think in 2025 or 2026 that it's hard for people to get lost or pulled away and disappear. And I think this shows that people can like be taken away in a suburb and still even be in the suburb, and people aren't going to find them because of our intense private lives, but also just the fact that the people in this suburb are, there's a Shirley Jackson-esque idea here of people being suspicious of each other, and they don't have close relationships with each other. They're just like, hey, your kid goes to school with mine. So there's not a set kind of net in this town. There's not a set kind of community feel in this town. And so even with all the Ring cameras and the surveillance and everything, it's still possible for mysteries like this to happen. I also thought it was interesting that there was one child left, and then he and the teacher become the center of attention. I think, you think about the idea of suspicion of teachers and her being an outsider because she's coming from a different place she was teaching as, a suspicion of outsiders. It was handled perfectly. In fact, before you find out about Amy Madigan's character, it seems like it's going to be straight up just people kind of like scapegoating outsiders and blaming people, probably unfortunately incorrectly, and kind of tearing the town apart. But of course, we know that we're dealing with this in our Hagsploitation theme, so there's something else going on. And before I pass it back to you, Matt, I think the other first impression I had that I found interesting was what you were talking about, which is the fact that this is a mystery, because I do like mysteries. I didn't know anything about these vignettes, the 6 points of view. So when it started out with like, this is a true story and these are the details, because we have a child who was not involved narrating it for us about how this happened 2 years ago, and et cetera, et cetera. I was intrigued. And then the whole movie is really trying to solve the mystery, which we don't get 100% solution because we still have a lot of questions at the end. But the way it was handled by breaking up the narrative, like, so that's not told to us chronologically, that's like catnip to me. So seeing each section from the perspective of a certain character and then putting the pieces together as I go is like, oh, that's where that person was when this happened, or that's what was going on when this phone call happened. I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, I think the premise of it caught my attention originally. I was a little nervous about the violence, but now that I've watched it, I think the mystery aspect and definitely the chronology were two of the things I found really interesting. And of course, there's Amy Madigan's character, Aunt Gladys, who I'm sure we're going to talk about because she is sprinkled throughout the movie, but comes into the fore toward the end when we finally start getting the background of what happened before the kids disappeared. But I don't want to go too far ahead. Matt, I know that when we were talking before we hit record, we both were talking briefly about how much we enjoyed the non-chronological way of telling the story and kind of the little vignettes or perspectives. So I don't know, maybe we should start there. I know you said you had some thoughts on that.
I did indeed say that, and I would love to start there. That's sounds like a great idea. So, what I wanted to say, and kind of caught myself before we dove too much into the discussion before we actually started recording is kind of what you were starting to touch on already, the non-chronological aspect of it. And um, what we have essentially in this movie is 6 points of view, and each one of them is even introduced with its own title card with the character's name. So as each vignette ends and the next one starts, it's very telegraphed, very signaled. Okay, this is over. Now we're having Archer's story. Now we're having Paul's story, etc., etc. And I thought it was a really I thought it was a really good choice to have it start the movie start with Justine's point of view. She is the teacher of the class that disappears. Almost all completely disappears. The class has only one person there that day. Because, like you said, Mel, it starts off with this kind of small town suspicion. She came from outside. She's a teacher and she's fairly new. She had kind of a semi troubled past, if you will. She had been let go from her previous teaching position for inappropriate behavior, apparently with another faculty member. Um, so she's somebody that the parents don't trust, and everyone seems to feel that she is withholding information or not being forthright, or that she must know something. I mean, she was with the kids day in and day out. How did she not know that something was happening, et cetera, et cetera. But what's really great about the way the movie is written and structured is that I mean, it really is tied to each person's point of view. And it's almost like a novel in that respect, and in the sense of it's like third person limited, if you will, since it's a film that we're viewing. That's kind of how it would be if it were written out as a novel, but it's so very limited because each vignette is completely restricted to what they know and what they're experiencing. And so you, as the viewer, are only getting what each character is experiencing. Now, you do get to see all of them, so eventually you get more and more of the puzzle revealed as the film goes on. But I thought it was such a great just kind of representation of kind of a metaphor for how we all live our lives, that each one of us has our own lives that we lead and our own internal lives. Now granted, there's no internal monologues going on. We're not privy to these characters inner thoughts, but all of us exist our own lives and we intersect with other people constantly, but all of those people are living their own lives. And I have my own viewpoint of what I've gone through and what I've experienced, and somebody else who may have gone through something very similar would have a different point of view or perspective or know more because of their background or what they have experienced yesterday or whatever. And watching all of these different lives intersect with one another is really cool, and it's really fascinating, and it really just like it sucked me in the first time I watched this, and it did the same thing with the second time. Like it just from the get-go sucked me in, and I was like, okay, I'm here. Like, show me Archer story, show me Paul, show me James, show me all of these people. And he does a really good job of cutting things off and moving to another vignette right as something big kind of happens, and moving to that next character's perspective will give you, the viewer, a little bit more information on the overall picture of things. But even, and I think this, I don't want to attribute intent as somebody who has, studied literature and things before. I don't want to say that this was Zach Kreger's intention, but it's definitely a way to read this. Is I think that's part of why we, at the end of the movie, don't have all the answers either, because just like each one of us in our own lives is limited to our experiences, so is the movie. The movie's limited to like six people's experiences, and that's not the full breadth and depth of the experience. We never get insight into Gladys's actual point of view. She's sort of this black hole around which all of the other people are revolving around. And so we can't peer past that event horizon. We can't see into what her motivations are. And so there's a lot there that doesn't get answered. And that's the way life is, right? I mean, um, there are things that happen that you never know the answer to. Maybe there is an explanation out there, but you don't know because you aren't privy to it for whatever reason.
Yeah, I like the way you were describing that like you can't tell the whole story without each of the characters' perspectives, but then at the same time, not every single person is going to see everything you need for 100% comprehension, especially since the older woman character, Aunt Gladys, and also an outsider who's just come into the town is wreaking havoc. We don't get her perspective. We just see her from, well, different characters' perspectives as they see her in dreams, or she is interrogated by the police or talks to the principal. But we don't see her in an extended way until the end, and we're seeing things from the child's perspective, Alex Lilly's perspective, the one who was not taken from the classroom. So yeah, I thought that was interesting too, that you mentioned that is kind of the hole that we're revolving around, is her, and that kind of empty middle of not quite knowing who exactly she is. We know who we think she is. We don't know who exactly she is. And we thought we knew why she came, but we learned she has more nefarious purposes. But without her background and anything about her, it's really hard to do everything. And then, yeah, we're just in life, you're just never going to know everything that's going on. So, like, while we are seeing these 6 vignettes, these people are not, they're living with each other in this story, and they're not seeing each other's perspectives like we are. So I like the way you described it as like third person, limited, omniscient. Like, we can't know everything, but we definitely know more than the characters know. And something else I thought was interesting about the shifting perspectives, and I mean, I guess this is like at the level of structure and like putting it together, but I really appreciated how, like you said, there was the like ending it in a really dramatic moment to leave us kind of hanging a little bit until we can get the other side at the end of each vignette. But another thing that I thought was really interesting was the way that there would be touch points in each of the points of view, or each of the sections based on character. Um, so like we see, you know, in one scene, we'll see something that Justine was going to do, or like when she sees Alex and is going to talk to him. And then we see later what was actually said between the two of them. We see, the principal kind of telling Justine that he's going to meet with Alex's parents, and then we see that meeting. We see, different characters encountering the Lilly home after the windows have been newspapered, and that kind of becomes a connector of time, like when people are seeing the house. Um, and so I thought it was, we find out that Archer was the one who painted her car. Like, she didn't know who was the one who painted which on the side of her car, but we find out later it was him. So the way that the sections are kind of interwoven with each other, I also appreciate it, because there would be these like touch points of things that we remembered happening, but we didn't fully understand because we didn't have the another side of it until we get the other character experiencing it. And so we know that like James is coming back to the police station, but we don't know with 100% certainty why until we see from his perspective what he was doing right beforehand. And that's necessary to make the plot hinge, but it's also, I think, to make it as intricately plotted as it is, kind of adds to that feeling of like we're observing this crazy train wreck like as is happening. And it also shows a lot of tragedy too, because it's like we see from scenes in Justine's section that she's trying to connect with Alex and trying to help him because she can see there's something wrong at home, which, is a thing. A couple of things she's gotten in trouble for in the past was hugging a child who was extremely upset and crying, and giving a child who had been left at school with no ride or ride home. So we can tell she cares about her students. And you have these really poignant moments where she can tell that Alex is being bullied, and Alex by Archer's kid. And Alex is very quiet and shy and doesn't fit in. And then when he's being abused by Aunt Gladys in the home, like the home becomes this place of hidden secrets. And we see Justine poking at that because she wants to help him, but that's a danger to him because we know that he's being threatened. Like he's basically in a chaotic kind of abusive home at that figure, because at that moment, because Gladys says she'll hurt his parents if he tries to get help. And so we see Justine treating him like a child who she sees is in trouble, but she can't connect with him because we unfortunately know how terrible things are for him at home. So I just love those little interlocking moments of connection amongst the vignettes that lend narrative structure before we get at the end kind of the reveals of kind of some of the plot holes are filled in to kind of tell us what has been going on.
Yes, absolutely. Completely agree with you there about well, everything that you said. And I also really liked that about the film, about how the way that it ties things together with those touchstone moments. And he does a really interesting job with it in terms of, like, you'll get the same like scene but shot from the other character's point of view. Like the first one that jumped out to me was when we leave Justine and go to Archer, who's one of the fathers of one of the kids that went missing, towards the end of his vignette, or maybe it's towards the middle. I don't remember when it comes in the actual vignette, but uh, we see the same sort of PTA meeting that Justine was part of, but from his point of view. And the way that it's shot is, instead of from being kind of over her shoulder looking out at the audience, it's framed on Josh Brolin looking at her from the audience. It's like, it's just kind of, even the way that he set up the cameras and things to really say, okay, here we're focusing on Archer, and this is Archer's perspective of this event that both of them were at. And so it, like, even just what gets shown on screen and what is within the frame is limited to Archer instead of Justine. And it happens over and over again in various places and ways. And I loved that. I loved this, like, oh, now we're seeing the exact same thing but from this other person's point of view. Especially interesting when we get Paul and James, the cop, and the I'm not sure what he was addicted to. I'm not sure if it was heroin or crystal meth, but I think it was heroin because he was trying to smoke it, but also had needles. But so we'll just call him the junkie. But um, seeing like their interactions from both sides was really interesting to me, because I mean, there's a lot of miscommunication and whatnot in the way those two interact throughout the movie. I don't know how much we want to touch on that part of the plot, but overall, uh, it was so good, just the way the vignettes overlapped and all of that. Um, I guess. Well, one thing I kind of wanted to mention before we maybe move on to maybe talking about Aunt Gladys more deeply is something that I had talked about in our pre-recording conversation, is just the framing of a lot of the shots, the way that he he did a lot of lingering shots, and shots that don't track or move a whole lot, where like, or where it will follow somebody, um, or be like the camera will be in front of them as they're walking and it will turn as they turn. But it's these very almost claustrophobic shots because you know that there's something else happening outside the view, and you'll almost get it, and then he won't show it, and then eventually he'll show it, and sometimes it's for a scare, sometimes it's for something else. It's not all used for horror effects, but I thought it was really well done. It really evoked for me the way that Kubrick filmed The Shining. There's those scenes where little Danny is riding his little tricycle around the Overlook Hotel, and it's the camera's always stationed down at his level, right behind him, and like he'll turn, and then the camera will go around the corner, and you know that something's there and something's coming, but you don't know when, you don't know what, and Zach Kreger did that so well that I just wanted to draw attention to it. In particular, the scene when Justine is staking out outside of Alex's house and ends up falling asleep, and it's nighttime, and you see the front door open, and then we get this shot from inside the car as we don't know who, but someone approaches with what looked to be scissors, maybe a knife. The camera doesn't move. We hear a car door open, but we don't see it. We only see the scissors come into frame. Like, it's so good at just ratcheting up the tension and anxiety because you're like, what is happening? Who is that? What is going on? And then the scissors just cut a lock of hair, and that's the end. Yeah. And it's one of those, like, you're waiting for something because I mean the music is starting to swell. It's all strings and minor chords and such, and then bam, uh, oh, well, that wasn't what I thought was going to happen, but that can't be good either. So I mean, that's one scene, but he does those same sorts of things in multiple ways, and it's just from a filmmaking perspective really well done. I say this as someone who is not a filmmaker. I have kind of studied it some, but I'm by no means an authority or expert. So, but for me, that was something that really stood out, and I really wanted to kind of highlight. Mel, did you have anything to add about that, or do you want to kind of bring in Aunt Gladys to the conversation?
Um, yeah, I can transition us to talking about Aunt Gladys. No, I like what you're saying there. I'm not sure how much more I can add, but I love that scene that you pointed out because yeah, it's perfect with the just staying on Justine's face as she's staking out the house, and then the time switch when she passes out. Like we know that's happened because all of a sudden it's light and then it's dark, and then yeah, everything that you described. I think another spot where some of that was going on was when James was breaking into the Lily house, and we know that the parents are in there in some sort of trance state from what Justine saw. And there's just the way that he discovers that the looking behind him, but then looking at him, and we can't see behind him when he walks past the base, like the camera's stuck on the basement door, but he's walking past it a couple times, and then he goes in it. Yeah, the way that I'm no expert on this, but I agree with you that the framing of the shots and the ways that also tied with people's perspectives, I thought was really interesting. But let's talk about Gladys. I guess I'll just try to. I mean, I'm assuming listeners, you've watched this movie, but I will just talk about her in general at first, and then we can try to get into her character a little bit because she is the hag of this movie if we're looking at it as Hagsploitation. So what we learn, like I mentioned earlier, Justine and Archer have these nightmares where they see her face. One of the most interesting parts of that, I think, is seeing her makeup, which is, it's almost like clownish, like just extra lipstick, white, kind of almost foundation, red wig. But seeing that makeup on Alex's face in Justine's dream, it's almost like indicating to her that there's possibly a connection here. James, one of the comical kind of moments, but also terrifying, is when James sees her waving in the woods. Again, the camera looking in different directions, and we think something's there and not, and then all of a sudden she's there, and all she does is wave. But we get these glimpses of her. But when we get to the final vignette, which is Alex's take on events and what happened, basically what it seems like is Alex gets along really well with his parents. They're a happy family. He seems to be doing okay. He's getting bullied at school and he's kind of shy, but his home seems like a really great place to be. We find out, however, that an aunt that nobody really knows that much about. At one point, they say, the father says, I don't really know her. Alex has never seen her. The mom is kind of iffy on her. Um, we're basically led to believe that it either is an aunt that they just have never really talked to and is not really involved in the family and is popping up and needs help, or possibly this person is pretending to be an aunt. But the mother basically feels obligated because she says her mom would have taken care of this person because she's family no matter what. And so Gladys comes into their lives and she's extremely sick. They're kind of like worried she might be close to death and they're not sure how to take care of her. And Alex is really creeped out because we have this outsider that he doesn't know or trust. His dad is a little like worried about what's going on. It starts to kind of change his home environment. And then Gladys basically takes over because basically what we are led to believe, and from what we see and what she says to Alex, is that she is sick. We don't know if it's like she just wants to extend her life or if she is sick with something. And she's very weak and she needs to somehow get like energy or sustenance or health from other people. So she basically puts Alex's parents in a trance, and she has this kind of magic that she uses, that she can control people with. And so through this manipulation and this control, she basically, holds Alex on a really tight leash. Like he has to do what she wants, which is bring her the possessions of his classmates so she can lure them to the house so she can suck their energy too, or whatever she's doing. So he basically becomes an extension of her. He goes out into the world and gets the food that he feeds the people who are in a trance, and she feeds off the people. He helps her to turn the house into kind of like a fortress that people can't see in. He lies and tells the authorities what she thinks they need to hear, and he goes along with it. And so we have him basically go really quickly from what seems to be a comfortable, safe home environment to an environment um, under siege by this woman who's basically turning his house into like a witch's lair or something. Um, So, I mean, I think we should probably talk a little bit about how this character relates to things we talked about before. I mean, I think there is an idea of her as being scary because of the way she doesn't present herself in a way that's like socially acceptable. People are thrown off by her, even though she seems pretty confident in the way she's presenting herself. She's older. There's this idea of being near death and being alone and needing help, but then she kind of takes advantage of that. But that also is something that can be terrifying. We've talked about that, aging, presentation of a woman in society. She seems to be unmarried. She's an aunt. We've got all the kind of characteristics. Amy Madigan talked about how she was kind of inspired in a way by Baby Jane with the makeup and the kind of over the top sensibilities. So there's definitely some details about her that tie to the topic that we have been talking about. I think in this one, it's kind of, well, I want to hear from you, Matt, so I don't want to go too far with this, but I think the fact that she preys on a child is also kind of terrifying. Like, she's not a mother figure. She's not of this place. She's not part of this family. And she kind of, um, God, for lack of a better word, is a predator in a way. I mean, she's basically going after him and using him in a way as an extension of herself in the town. So I think that also is disturbing, like an older person, kind of using the child or being a danger in that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, those are just some of I don't want to say superficial, but those are just some of the characteristics that I saw that kind of link her to some of the characters that we've had before. But there's also something about her that's completely inexplicable too. It's not as cut and dry as like Straight Jacket. It's not as cut and dry as um, Serial Mom even. So I don't know. What do you think, Matt?
Well, I agree with everything that you've said so far. I think for me, one of the ways, and this is probably like the most obvious way that she fits into the hagsploitation part of things is in the way that she's first presented to us, which is, like you said, wearing this wig that is cut very strangely. Like the bangs on it are cut very, very, very high, like almost awkwardly high, I would describe them as. And she's wearing makeup, but the lipstick is like smeared and not on properly. And I don't know, like she gives this vibe from the moment you first see her as kind of hitting an uncanny valley. Like she feels like she could be a person who's not good at personing, or she could be a monster in a person suit. And I don't know what she is. And I know you had actually mentioned an interview with Amy Madigan where she had essentially said that Zach Kreger had told her, this character can either be a person or a monster. And then she refused to answer what she settled on for her portrayal of the character, which I think was great. but I think that's kind of the heart of it, though, is that part of it is her age and her state, her frail state is something that she absolutely uses and weaponizes. Huh? See what I did there with the pun? But it's absolutely something that she weaponizes as a way to deflect and keep people off of her, as like keep the suspicion off of her. When she meets with the principal and tells him that the parents are unwell. Oh, but it's not anything terminal. They have a touch of the consumption. And he's like, oh, haha, yeah, I've only heard that referred to like older days, like tuberculosis or something. And she refuses to answer what they actually have, because of course they have nothing. They're in some sort of weird magical trance. But she uses that to deflect. And the fact that she is, you know, elderly and frail is something that she uses to her own advantage to deflect. I mean, obviously, Marcus, the principal, is suspicious, or at least is finds her off-putting, but he can't really put his finger on it. And then when she shows up at his house and is talking to him about how she was waiting for the bus, but then it turned out she was standing on the wrong corner, and then she's had to walk all the way across town to get here, and all of these things. And then she ends it with, and he and his husband are both trying to you know shut the door and send her away, like you're interrupting our day, please go away. But she uses, again, she's like, I've walked all over town, and I feel like I'm on the verge of collapse. So she's taking these things that are actual weaknesses for her and weaving them into her predation, if you will. And yeah, I think a lot of that comes down to the exploitation aspect of it, that the characters see her as this older woman, and we all, I think, have been taught by society to, we respect our elders, but also, be polite to older people. They, especially once you get past middle age and into actual like elder years or elderly years, they move a little slower. They're a little more frail. You've got to be a little more gentle with them. These are all things that we're collectively just taught by our society. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that by any means, but that is something that Gladys very much is aware of and uses to her advantage.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. I think she straddles the line between being the hag figure, and I'm putting this in quotes that just scares the characters, like, whoa, she's just this shock of a character in some ways, the way she dresses, the way she is. But then, yeah, manipulates it in order to, aid her mission, which is to do whatever it takes to, I guess, extend her life, whether she's sick or she just is like super old. The fact that she suggested a consumption was like, okay, so was she alive during times of consumption? Is that what this is indicating to us? Or is she just being silly? She also kind of uses almost like ditziness and eccentricity sometimes. But then I'm using the term I'm saying that using the term using because that's what she does. I think one of the things that Madigan does so well in this part is that she, like we've talked about before in other movies in this genre, turns her emotions on a dime. Like she can go from being as eccentric or using kind of characteristics of the elderly to get her way into so for an example, to get her way into Marcus's house, as you were pointing out. And then when she uses her magic right in front of them to force Marcus to brutally murder his husband, while the murder is happening, like when she's making it happen, and she keeps saying, you didn't call the police, you didn't call the police. And when she finds out they did, and then she does this, um, you see her change, like you see her shift into a very cold and calculated person. While he's finishing up killing his husband, she puts all her stuff careful. She washes the blood off her hands, straightens some stuff in the kitchen, puts stuff back in her bag, and just walks by it. Nothing's happening, and jumps in her car because she never did try to catch buses or anything, right? I mean, like she can go from the persona of the helpless old lady that she needs to get in to a cold-blooded killer in 5 seconds. We see the same thing in Alex's section when his parents are in the trance and she's trying to talk to him like, oh, sweetie, this, and they're sick and we're going to take care of them. And he's just like, don't touch me. I want my parents back. And when he starts fighting her, she immediately like just changes cold, yells at him, sends him to bed. Next day, sits him down, makes his parents hurt themselves. And that's where we get the intro that you read. So there are these moments where, we see her like come home with the costume on after she's been talking to the detectives and pretending the father had a stroke, or talking to the principal or whatever, and doing stuff at the house. And she's in her regular clothes and ordering Alex around and being cruel. And so yeah, I mean, she's not just manipulating people's expectations so that they sell her short, like that she can sneak up on them, but she's also kind of manipulating the fact that that she can kind of hide her monstrosity with that, but also that as this elderly woman, people are possibly going to also be kind of afraid of her too, because she's kind of riding both sides of that category. Um, so yeah, but I mean, she's still ambiguous because we still don't know. I mean, I guess it's a horror movie, so even though she's in pieces at the end, we don't know. She could come back, I guess. I don't know, because if she wasn't a human, who knows? Because we still don't know at the end. um, After everything that happens in the house with her sticking the zombies on people and trances on people and that sort of thing. Um, I don't know. She's such a complex character, but every time I think about her, um, I come back to how there's so much we don't know. But we know she affected those people pretty badly because it's like 2 years later and they're still feeling the effects of everything she did.
Well, absolutely. And that is, I mean, that's kind of the central thing is clearly she is using some kind of magic. That is something that we do have an answer for. It's some kind of spell where she gets something from a person, something valuable or meaningful to them, or something off of their body, like a lock of hair or something, and she's using that to create these hypnotic states that these people are in. But it's never really clarified what the purpose for it is, or what her motivations are. Like you said, she's said that she's dying, and she seems to be frail, and she tells Alex um, at one point specifically that she's dying, and no hospital can help her, but there's something you can do for me, and that's bring all these uh, things from everyone in your classroom. But the overall motivation is unclear. Like, is she keeping the kids standing there in the basement to siphon their life? Is she planning on using them actually as weapons? Because that's the only way that we see the magic work is when she turns Marcus into a weapon to try to kill Justine, and then when she turns Paul and Archer into weapons in the climax at the end of the movie. I mean, what's her end game? What is she after in all of this? We don't know, and I think that's all part of kind of where the horror lies, is that her motivations are unknown and unknowable because, well, by the end, like you said, she's in literal pieces. But um yeah, I guess I kind of want to, since we're kind of getting towards the end of the episode and the movie, maybe just kind of broach that question of what do you think Gladys is? Maybe we can kind of talk about that to wrap things up, because I don't know. I'm torn. Um, I feel like in a lot of ways the movie signals that she is some sort of witch who's trying to extend her life. Um, Especially since witch is what gets written on Justine's car, not bitch, which is what I was expecting it to say, or something like that, but witch with a W. That seemed like, oh well, that's a nice little bit of, I don't think foreshadowing is the word, but maybe symbolism. But there's so much about her as a character that also can lead to the conclusion that she is some sort of inhuman monster, or maybe she's sort of like Gollum from Lord of the Rings, where she was a human once, but she's been so twisted by this magic life extension thing that she's been doing that it's turned her into more monster than person. I don't know. I keep coming back to the witch part of it, though, because it also makes me think a lot of Roald Dahl's The Witches. Both of those film adaptations and the book really show how the witches are human-like but not human, and when they have their witches convention and take off their shoes and wigs and everything else and really go full witch, they are actually monsters, instead of humans. They're just human-like. So that's kind of where I keep landing on. But of course, I mean, we're never going to have the answer, but it's fun to discuss. So what do you think, Mel? Human, monster, somewhere in between?
Oh man. I don't know if I can come down on one way or the other. I know that seems like a cop out, but I also like these things where you can't quite figure it out. I agree with you that there's a lot of evidence for witch. I was also thinking the fact that Archer writes witch on her car. It's interesting because he dreams and sees her face. Um, it's almost like her spell, like she's working a spell on, it's like her spell is growing. Like once she's affected the kids, she's affecting their parents. She affected Justine's class, so she appears in Justine's dreams. That seems witch-like to me, and that if she's affecting him, it makes sense that he would write witch on the car. I totally agreed with you on the choice of word there. The fact that she has a potted plant with her, like I guess your Aunt Gladys would have if she came to live with you, but it kills people. Like she could use it to kill people. Well, she uses it to weaponize people, to kill people. We don't know. Maybe she could do good things with it, but it's pretty nasty looking. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's a use of the word. There's the fact that she has some sort of magical power. She creates a potion at one point. She has the candles all over the house. There's a lot in it that's pointing to witch. So I don't know. I wonder if she's we don't even know if she's really an aunt in this family or if she just pretended she was to get in. It's like so ambiguous. But maybe she is Aunt Gladys. They really haven't seen her in a while. She started practicing witchcraft and it's changed her in some way. Or maybe she's been in this family for a long, 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 long time and has hidden herself away. And that's why no one's seen her and she keeps elongating her life. But then there's that little bit in the back of my head is like you said, the moments when she acts like she's out of time or like she's acting human but isn't. The way she uses the makeup. I mean, is her body just a way she's presenting to people around her? In which case she could be a monster. I mean, in a way, she's a monster, whether she's human or not. But I don't know. I think it's a strength of the movie that we can get to the end of it and think probably she was a witch, but at the same time, we're kind of like, maybe there was something else inside of her. Maybe she's not really human. I like the way you kind of made that connection to Dahl's representation of witches. It's really interesting. And we're ending our series on hagsploitation. I guess witches are kind of like, some of the initial kind of way back versions of hagsploitation, right? So it kind of makes sense to manipulate that in that way. So, listeners, rather than Matt and I going round and around in circles about this, that's kind of where we stand. If you've seen Weapons and you have a thought about who or what Aunt Gladys is and you want to communicate with us via email or social media, you can. If you haven't seen Weapons yet, I recommend checking it out, particularly if you're interested in this subgenre. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram, and we have a Facebook page. Our email is nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon. We have some mini episodes over there that you can listen to. And we also have merchandise available at our website, nofearcast.com. Or you can simply rate and review us, which is entirely free and helps other listeners find us. Theme music by Nicholas Gasparini. And we will be back with a brand new episode.